Chapter 12 of A Narrative of the Life of Mrs. Mary Jemison. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. A Narrative of the Life of Mrs. Mary Jemison by James E. Seaver. Chapter 12. Being now left a widow in my old age, to mourn the loss of a husband who had treated me well and with whom I had raised 5 children, and having suffered the loss of an affectionate son, I fondly fostered the hope that my melancholy vicissitudes had ended, and that the remainder of my time would be characterized by nothing unpropitious. My children, dutiful and kind, lived near me, and apparently nothing obstructed our happiness. But a short time, however, elapsed after my husband's death before my troubles were renewed with redoubled severity. John's hands having been once stained in the blood of a brother, it was not strange that after his acquittal every person of his acquaintance should shun him, from a fear of his repeating upon them the same ceremony that he had practiced upon Thomas. My son Jesse went to Mount Morris, a few miles from home, on business, in the winter after the death of his father, and it so happened that his brother John was there, who requested Jesse to come home with him. Jesse, fearing that John would commence a quarrel with him on the way, declined the invitation, and tarried overnight. From that time John conceived himself despised by Jesse, and was highly enraged at the treatment which he had received. Very little was said, however, and it all passed off, apparently, till some time in the month of May, 1812, at which time Mr. Robert Whaley, who lived in the town of Castile, within 4 miles of me, came to my house early on Monday morning to hire George Chongo, my son-in-law, and John and Jesse, to go that day and help him slide a quantity of boards from the top of the hill to the river, where he calculated to build a raft of them for market. They all concluded to go with Mr. Whaley, and made ready as soon as possible. But before they set out, I charged them not to drink any whiskey, for I was confident that if they did, they would surely have a quarrel in consequence of it. They went and worked till almost night, when a quarrel ensued between Chongo and Jesse, in consequence of the whiskey that they had drank through the day, which terminated in a battle, and Chongo got whipped. When Jesse had got through with Chongo, he told Mr. Whaley that he would go home, and directly went off. He, however, went but a few rods before he stopped and lay down by the side of a log to wait, as was supposed, for company. John, as soon as Jesse was gone, went to Mr. Whaley with his knife in his hand and bade him jogo, that is, be gone, at the same time telling him that Jesse was a bad man. Mr. Whaley, seeing that his countenance was changed, and that he was determined upon something desperate, was alarmed for his own safety, and turned towards home, leaving Chongo on the ground drunk, near to where Jesse had lain, who by this time had got up and was advancing towards John. Mr. Whaley was soon out of hearing of them, but some of his workmen stayed till it was dark. Jesse came up to John and said to him, "You want more whiskey, and more fighting," and after a few words went at him, to try in the first place to get away his knife. In this he did not succeed, and they parted. By this time the night had come on, and it was dark. Again they clinched, and at length in their struggle they both fell. John, having his knife in his hand, came under, and in that situation gave Jesse a fatal stab with his knife, and repeated the blows till Jesse cried out, "Brother, you have killed me!" quit his hold, and settled back upon the ground. Upon hearing this, John left him and came to Thomas's widow's house, told them that he had been fighting with their uncle whom he had killed, and showed them his knife. Next morning, as soon as it was light, Thomas's and John's children came and told me that Jesse was dead in the woods, and also informed me how he came by his death. John soon followed them and informed me himself of all that had taken place between him and his brother, and seemed to be somewhat sorrowful for his conduct. You can better imagine what my feelings were than I can describe them. My darling son, my youngest child, him on whom I depended, was dead, and I, in my old age, left destitute of a helping hand. As soon as it was consistent for me, I got Mr. George Jemison, of whom I shall have occasion to speak, to go with his sleigh to where Jesse was, and bring him home, a distance of 3 or 4 miles. My daughter Polly arrived at the fatal spot first. We got there soon after her, though I went the whole distance on foot. By this time, Chongo, who was left on the ground drunk the night before, had become sober and sensible of the great misfortune which had happened to our family. I was overcome with grief at the sight of my murdered son, and so far lost the command of myself as to be almost frantic, and those who were present were obliged to hold me from going near him. On examining the body, it was found that it had received 18 wounds so deep and large that it was believed that either of them would have proved mortal. The corpse was carried to my house and kept till the Thursday following, when it was buried after the manner of burying white people. Jesse was 27 or 8 years old when he was killed. His temper had been uniformly very mild and friendly, and he was inclined to copy after the white people, both in his manners and dress. Although he was naturally temperate, he occasionally became intoxicated, but never was quarrelsome or mischievous. With the white people he was intimate, and learned from them their habits of industry, which he was fond of practicing, especially when my comfort demanded his labor. As I have observed, it is the custom amongst the Indians for the women to perform all the labor in and out of doors, and I had the whole to do, with the help of my daughters, till Jesse arrived to a sufficient age to assist us. He was disposed to labor in the cornfield, to chop my wood, milk my cows, and attend to any kind of business that would make my task the lighter. On the account of his having been my youngest child, and so willing to help me, I am sensible that I loved him better than I did either of my other children. After he began to understand my situation, and the means of rendering it more easy, I never wanted for anything that was in his power to bestow. But since his death, as I have had all my labor to perform alone, I have constantly seen hard times. Jesse shunned the company of his brothers, and the Indians generally, and never attended their frolics, and it was supposed that this, together with my partiality for him, were the causes which excited in John so great a degree of envy, that nothing short of death would satisfy it. End of chapter 12.